Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this webinar with Universita Bocconi. My name is Mark Huntington. I'm the Managing Director of an organisation called A Star Future. We have actually been working with Bocconi in the UK since 2006. So in the last 15 years, we've seen lots of changes. Some of them, well, most of them good. Certainly in regards to the number of British students going to study at Bocconi, always good. So there's definitely more and more British educated students going there than there was 15 years ago. Today you're going to learn a little bit more about why that is, that's for sure. So we've got Mario Tabarini, who's Head of Guidance at the university. He will be introducing the university in just one moment. And then you can perhaps see Nicholas Erasmus, who's a recent graduate of the university, who's going to give his perspective of his time in Milan. And then Elisa Raveglia, who will talk about how we get you in there. So there's going to be information about the university, information about the experience, and then also information about the entry requirements, etc., etc. And without further ado, I would like Mario to just share his screen and share a few words about the university, if he could.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much. Let me go full screen here. Just 1 second. So welcome, everybody. My name is Mario Tabarini. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. I'm in charge of the guidance and recruitment office here at Bocconi. So a few words, welcome, everybody. A few words about Bocconi. We are a university which is kind of recent for Italian standards. We were founded in 1902. We have very old universities in Italy, like in the UK. But we were the first one actually granting a degree in economics. We were the first basically business school of commerce and economics. And we've been the only one in Italy for many years, for about 50 years. And we've been the first in many ways in Italy, first in setting up exchange programs in 1974, well before the Erasmus program, the mobility of students within Europe that was born in 1987. We were also the first one granting a degree fully taught in English, fully offered in English in 2001, the Bachelor of International Economics and Management, which is still existing, by the way. We are a mid-sized university. We don't cover all the disciplines. We cover only disciplines related, I would say, to the broader field of social sciences. And we are very international. 41% of students in courses taught in English, which are the majority in degrees taught in English, are non-Italian. Actually, this percentage, if we consider only the first year, this year, the intake, we're going around 50%. So half Italian, half international. As a result, we have 100 nationalities on campus every single year. About positioning of Bocconi, we are generally, if you consider basically any ranking from Financial Times, QS to any other ranking, officially recognized, we are around the top 20 in the world in fields of social sciences, so management, finance, economics, even political science. And in Europe, we are, Europe considering also the UK, we are among the top 5. Very often in continental Europe, we are number 1 or number 2 in these rankings. We are very international, as mentioned before. We have an incredible network of partner schools, so over 280 partner schools, basically all over the world. You can see the slide here, and we combine the quantity of opportunities. So in 280 places, we offer every year over 2,000 actually opportunities to our students. But we also combine it with the quality. So in each continent, we have partnership with the top institutions in the broader field of social sciences. We are very much connected also with employers. Because we were born as a business school and were founded by an entrepreneur, Mr. Bocconi, who decided to put in his money on education at a certain point of his life. So we are very much connected with employers. Every given year, we have over 2,500 employers actively doing things on and off campus for students. And we have not only from the companies, but all over the place, nearly 11,000 job offers and internship offers every single year. And we also, this is also given to the help of our alumni, network of alumni worldwide, which are 120,000. We have our own career fairs, Bocconi and Jobs. This year we went virtual, but usually it's not only in Milano, in our campus, but also in other places, including London. We've been doing physical Bocconi and Jobs London for many years and virtual this year. And then we have our, let's say, career fair. There is a very specific investment banking virtual career fair with all the top investment banks from all over the places, but mainly, of course, from UK, from London. And we have our recruiting days dedicated to certain areas of work. So many events to give our students the opportunities to find a good job or internship. As you can see from these figures, we are at around 96% of placement of students 1 year after graduation. And it's physiological, the 4% that are not working 1 year after graduation. And I would say that 3 out of 4 work in Italy, but almost a third, let's say from around 31% work and live abroad. These percentages are calculated on our masters, because our bachelor students, about 95% of the students go on and continue doing a master, pursuing a master. And these figures are very high. The few students who decide after the bachelor to go work, they find easily a job, but the percentages are calculated on the master because of the reason mentioned before. We have a wide offer of bachelor programs. The large majority, as I mentioned before, are taught in English, but I'm mentioning here also some courses taught in Italian, since there may be some Italian students studying in the UK or maybe interested also in the courses in Italian. We go from management to finance to management of arts, culture, communication, so very country specific, I would say. Milan is the fashion capital, Italy is the country of museums, arts, and generally speaking, all the, let's say, the arts and the management of the arts is really needed here, because not only in Italy, worldwide, it's really needed. So that course address those people who are really interested in joining this area, specific area of management. Then we have politics and government, very interesting course with an embedded and mandatory and guaranteed exchange abroad. Then we have economics, pure economics course, and then 2 courses more focused on the data science area. One is economics management and computer science, and one is that was actually the new kid in our offer is mathematical and computing sciences for artificial intelligence, which was let's say the first edition was created, actually started last year in 2020. The last, not the least, of course, is the World Bachelor in Business, our flagship program. It's a 4-year program. All the bachelors in Italy are 3 years. This bachelor is 4 years because after 4 years you get 3 degrees. One from Bocconi, one from the University of Southern California, the Marshall School of Business, which is among the top 10 business schools in the US, and located in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, and the Business School of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, one of the top 5 business schools in Asia, located in Hong Kong, of course. So it's a unique flagship program where you can get 3 degrees in 4 years. You spend the first year in Los Angeles, second year in Hong Kong, third year in Milan, and fourth year you decide in any of the places where you want to spend the last year. So this is it for now. I would say let's say leave the floor again to Mark, and then we'll continue with Elisa with the presentation afterwards.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mario. So that gives everybody an indication as to what Bocconi is and what it teaches and how well ranked it is and all the rest of it. I'm just going to ask Mario a few questions before we move on to hear from our next guest. Talking of questions, I whizzed straight into this and didn't even mention the fact that you, as a participant, can obviously ask questions. Please do through the Q&A function that you'll see here on this webinar, and we will get back to you as and when. But Mario, thanks for that introduction of the university. First question I'd really have for you is one related to the job market. You reflected there that most of your students don't go into the job market until they've completed a master's degree, which is quite common for many European countries. But what's different this year is obviously they're graduating into the teeth of this COVID scenario. How have you seen that affect your graduates last year and this year?
Oh, we are very recent. We're not, we don't have the official data for this last graduation yet, but in the last year, the latest data that we have with our career service, I was talking to them last week, and we are not going down in terms of percentage. Exceptionally, that 95.7 will be even higher for this year graduation. So we're going pretty well. Of course, this is we cannot think long term in these times, right. But for now we have seen a very good result in terms of our placement. I have to say that generally speaking, Bocconi, also when it comes to recruitment, so my activities, my area of activity expertise, we have seen an incredible increase in terms of applications. We went up this year for the 2021 intake by 53% compared to last year, which was incredible. And last year, we were already doing better than the year before. And this was valid for international students, bachelor, this is the specific case, but also for master and also domestic. So generally speaking, we went very well. So we didn't suffer, and we didn't suffer on the incoming side, on intake, but also on the, let's say, outgoing afterwards, on the placement. So far so good. Of course, these are very unpredictable times, so I'm not saying, I really hope we're going for the best for the next year.
I mean, there's limited scope for what any university can do for its graduates, isn't there? But it does sound to me, the message I'm getting there is that, yes, COVID has derailed lots of things, but not your graduates' employment prospects necessarily. It all looks to be going like normal, let's put it that way. And obviously in these challenging times, a lot of universities have seen an increase in the number of applications, which is obviously fantastic news for you. Also makes you slightly more competitive to get into, I would imagine, as well.
Yeah, really. This year was really competitive. I think this was an exceptional year. I think next year we will be around the same numbers of this year, but the increase was incredible. So 53% in one given year, it doesn't happen. It never happened, basically.
It's unsustainable, isn't it? And yeah. I mean, the implications of that we can discuss. Well, Elisa will be on the spot for that in a moment. The next thing I really wanted to ask you about, because obviously this is a webinar that's attracting a slightly different audience from your main audience, which even now is Italian. I mean, I know you're exceptionally international, but there is no other country where you occupy quite the space in the landscape as you do in Italy. Bocconi is so central to so many aspects of political and economic life there. How does that compare with the UK? How would you reassure somebody that Bocconi is in some way a meaningful university in a British context?
I'm quite lucky because today our communication office and our rector, our managing director sent out the official email about September, so I'm quite lucky. No, this year we went, let's say, we ran in a hybrid model. So half of the class was, half of the students were in class and half of the students were at home, doing some classes, let's say 1 week in class and 1 week at home. And the students who couldn't make it to Milano for any given reason, of course, related to the pandemic, visa issues, travel restrictions, sickness, of course, COVID itself. Next year is going to be the same, at least for the fall. So we strongly recommend the students to come on campus for the fall, but we guarantee any student who cannot come on campus he or she can attend the classes from home. And the idea is in the second semester of next academic year, so starting February, to be again everybody on campus. But of course, this is depends on how the situation evolves. I have to say that Italy is going quite well, especially in the last 2-3, let's say, months compared to before with vaccination. We are, as of today, with the first dose, we are at over 50% of the population, and the second dose or 2 doses, it's about 26% of the population. So we are moving quite fast, and the situation is improving. Next week, we are. I think it will be, let's say, all the restriction will be off basically all over Italy. This is what we can say right now. But to reassure the people is you are not obliged to come on campus if you cannot, but we want you on campus. This is
And I think most people will want to come, and bearing in mind we are talking about 2022 at the earliest for most of our guests this evening, we would rather hope that things are back to normal by then. But yes, again, it's still so unknowable, isn't it, unfortunately? I mean, do you see any aspects of Bocconi education that will definitely be different in 2022 as a result of the pandemic, or is it too early to say for sure that anything will remain changed?
So Bocconi believes in the in-person teaching, and this is an asset. So we're not granting online degrees and so on and so forth. So this is an asset. This is it. Having said that, of course, the pandemic, unfortunately, the pandemic has been a very unfortunate event, but in many ways improved many things very quickly. In other situations, it wouldn't be the same. And one of the things where Bocconi moved very fast was the online education, let's say, in addition to the physical one. So I see in the 2020, but also next year, but also the following year, I see an improvement in our, let's say, helping online, having online tools, helping out the physical education or the classes. And this is also thanks to our center. We have a center which is called Build, which was created before the pandemic in 2017, and it's a center that helps the faculty members to design courses which can be hybrid and having a part online and a part on campus. So this was improved very quickly this year, and I think in the following years this will be used a lot and can even let's say improve our teaching model.
I do also remember, Mario, I mean, obviously you've reiterated the commitment to in-person teaching as being the best ordinarily, if we should say that. But I do recall in one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned about MOOCs and is it something on,
Yep.
You've got a few courses out there that people can have a look at and sample online?
Absolutely. We are a partner of Coursera, and we have some MOOCs online, and I think we can share the link, and we definitely we have those courses that you can take.
I will, in the follow-up email to this webinar, I'll make sure that people get the link to Coursera. So if you actually want to see what a Bocconi class looks like before you get a chance to even apply, then, you know, I think that's useful. And I think it's only become more useful, bearing in mind this is a reality of what education is going to be like in the future. Now, the good thing about everything that Mario has told us right now is that you don't have to just take his word for it, because today we are actually joined by Nicholas Erasmus, who is a recent graduate of Bocconi from the UK, and he can tell you about his experience there, I hope, and maybe comment on some of the things that Mario said and then talk about it from his own perspective. So Nicholas, thanks for coming along tonight. Perhaps you could tell us what it was you studied at Milan and when it was you finished, first of all.
Sure. So the course that I studied was International Economics and Finance. I graduated in October last year, and I think the reasons behind me applying to Bocconi were, I mean, primarily it's rank. When you're applying for a course in business finance, which is immensely competitive, the first thing you should look above all is the rank of the university, because it is probably the course that's offered most frequently. And without question, the job markets of which you'll enter, international investment banking, asset management, private equity, or big corporates, is highly, highly, highly competitive. And the first thing that those employers will look at is your rank. And, you know, Bocconi's rank is going from strength to strength. You know, as your slide showed, it was 7th for finance. It's, you know, top 3, top 4 in Europe. And certainly, I mean, I wasn't fully aware when I went to Bocconi of its influence, etc., in the job market. But when, for example, I was doing summer internships, etc., within investment banking, it was really quite obvious that Bocconi was not only known but very well known and well regarded. Particularly, they mentioned that Bocconi has a reputation of having actually quite particularly good quality courses, and the content much more thorough than, for example, its comparables.
Okay. You mentioned that you did a couple of internships. Which kind of organizations did you do those with?
I did 2 internships. One was at an asset management firm, and another one was within investment banking, right, in London. So both.
And that's where you see yourself ending up, is it?
Yes, that's the hope. I think that's, you know, I did economics and finance, so I mean, a lot of the skill sets that I learned in those courses, I think are most applicable within that industry. But for example, I have colleagues of mine who've done international economics and management, and they're working now, for example, in big corporates. One of them's working at Daimler, another is working at Essity. It's all the job market is. I think the job market, I just need to reiterate, at Bocconi is a real strength of Bocconi. It's an absolute machine in terms of getting you placed into good companies and getting you jobs. It's actually quite. You really are very fortunate when you have the career service at your disposal.
But at the moment, you're not actually working. You're in between, about to start your next phase of studies. Is that correct?
Yes.
What are you doing? Where are you at in your journey, if you like?
Yes. So following on from what Mario said, I was one of those students who decided to do a master's degree rather than go straight into the job market. When I was graduating, it was really at the peak of this coronavirus crisis. It was a lot of uncertainty, and I just thought, okay, I'd like to specialise a bit more. I have a huge interest and passion in M&A law, and wanted to do a course more in that. And so I'm doing my master's in Dublin in M&A law. As Mario said, most people decide to do a master's because it's just becoming more and more required now than it was, for example, 10 years ago in the job market. But there are people I know in my course, there was about 200 people, and about maybe 40, 50 decided to go for jobs straight away.
But now coming back to your time at Bocconi, you've talked a lot about sort of the job aspirations, if you like. And while that is a compelling reason for anybody to choose any university, these are 3 years of your life that are supposed to be fun, right? So
yeah.
How would you describe your actual experience at Bocconi? It can't all be just an audition for an investment bank, can it?
No, absolutely not. I think the first thing you've got to realise about Bocconi is in Milan, which it's impossible not to have a wonderfully balanced time in Milan. It is so multicultural, it is so international. I think the first myth that needs to be squashed, that the fact that you're going to be living in Milan and not being able to speak Italian fluently is just not going to be able to work. That I can tell you up my own back. I spoke zero Italian when I started in Milan, and it's such a multicultural, diverse city that it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, the lakes are within the Italian lakes. If you've never been there, they're an hour and a half away from Milan. You can go skiing within 2 hours. So, I mean, there's a huge opportunity of having a really good time at the university as well.
And obviously an opportunity to learn Italian, which I hope you took.
No, exactly, yeah. I mean, so in Bocconi, it's obligatory within your first or second year to take Italian as a language, which is incredibly important. Right. I think having friends of mine who, for example, went to comparable UK universities, Oxford, LSE, etc. The one thing that really did help at Bocconi was the emphasis on having that second language apart from English. And particularly within, for example, when I was applying for jobs, it was really quite evident that they would always say, okay, can you converse in a second European language or even international language? And Bocconi really does emphasize that. And it's something I really, really do applaud.
So you find that is something that investment banks and so on will ask for in a job interview? Like, can you?
Yes, I think, certainly, I think particularly international investment banks, I think whatever people's views on Brexit, I think the need for European language is going to be ever more, because banks are relocating. Some of them are relocating to Frankfurt. Like, for example, I know colleagues of mine who were supposed to go to Morgan Stanley in London and now Morgan Stanley in Frankfurt, and so obviously they'll need that second European language. And it's just, again, it's a very competitive environment. So if you've got something which can just add to your resume and give you that much more strength and differentiate you, is just going to be a plus at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Nicholas, for sharing a little bit about your experiences there. Obviously, for everybody here, if you've got questions you'd like to ask him, he's going to have a slightly different take on this from everybody else that you see on this screen. Please do. But before we get stuck into the Q&A, what I'd like to do now is invite Elisa to talk a little bit more about the sort of more practical elements of applying to Bocconi, entry requirements. I know some of you on this call will be looking to apply through the early admission session where the deadline is this Friday, I believe. So, you know, get a move on if you haven't done that already. But she'll talk to you a little bit about why you should do that, why it's not the end of the world if you don't, and what you need to do whichever way you're going to go about applying. So over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for being here as well from my side. I'll try and share my screen and use a few slides while we talk. Okay. Let me know if we can. Oop. No, what happened? Let me retry. So while I open up my slides, I already saw a few questions in the Q&A box. So I'll make sure to start answering some of those while I talk about admissions. So let me see. Okay. Sorry for the technical glitch. Should be, there we go. You should be seeing my screen now. Okay, great. So when we come to talk about admissions, first of all, let's talk about what we consider when you apply to Bocconi in specific. There are three main elements that we consider for every student who applies. The first of all are high school transcripts, and specifically the transcript from your second to last and third to last year of high school. What does it mean? If you're doing A-levels, this would mean the GCSEs or IGCSEs year plus the ASs level year. If you're doing the IB, this would mean the GCSEs or the middle year programs and the IB1 grades. The final high school year grades of those 2 years. The second and most important element of evaluation is a test. You need a test to apply to Bocconi. You can decide among 3 tests. You can apply with an international aptitude test, such as the SAT or the ACT, or you can choose to apply with our own test, which is called Bocconi Test. And it's a test that is done completely online. Which test should you choose? Well, that is entirely up to you. You can really decide which one of the 3 you want to apply. We have no preference among those. It's really up to you. There are no minimum scores, no in terms of the ACT or Bocconi test, but still the higher the better, similar for the grades. In addition to that, if you have some additional language certificates, so language certificates, of course, not related to your mother tongue, but to additional languages that you might be studying at high school level, those can count in the application process as well. On top of this, we consider your CV and your personal statement. So we want to know also why are you applying to Bocconi, why to those or that specific courses, what could you bring to class, and the kind of experiences you might have done during your high school years that you want to share with us. Whenever you will be applying to Bocconi, you will be able to list up to 4 courses you're interested in. The first one is the one you like most, and then you can rank 3 others according to your preferences. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is how you do not apply to Bocconi, and this is not for UCAS. So in order to apply to Bocconi, you have to apply specifically to our university, and therefore you can list 4 bachelor programs you're interested in there. When it comes to, so these are the elements of admissions. I already saw a few questions before. One was also about the test. Well, if you decide to apply with the Bocconi test, a few practical information, that test is made up of 50 questions in 70 minutes. A part of questions is related to math. Math you should have been studying at high school level. And then a few other questions are related to logical reasoning and analytical reasoning. You can actually find an online test sample you can do on our website, plus a couple of test samples you can download just for you to have an idea in case you decide to apply with that one. When can you apply? Well, Mark mentioned already our early session. We do start selecting students early, I have to be honest. So junior students or students in their ASs level year, IB1 year can already apply. We actually have our early session closing up this week on the 24th of June. So you can apply in that one, and students applying in this early round will get the results of their application as early as at the end of this September. The other selection round is called, we have 2 additional selection rounds, one in winter called winter session, and it runs from mid-November until the end of January, and then the spring session that runs between March and April. When should you apply? Well, The first important thing it should underline is that you can reapply. So if you're really interested in Bocconi, the sooner the better, because you can apply in the earlier round, and then in case you do not get admitted, you can still reapply. And it will be like we have never seen your application before. So indeed, there is some advantage to that. To be transparent, the two biggest, I would say, selection rounds are the early session and the winter session. The spring session is what we call a residual round. So in that one, we have around 10–15% of the places available. So if you are really interested in Bocconi, my advice would be try and apply in those two first rounds, whether it's the early session already, or if you need a bit more time in the winter session, but maybe keep the spring session, as you know, backup or last resort, but it's better not to think about applying just in that one. Just very specific information, Mario mentioned at the beginning that we do have a different program, which is the World Bachelor in Business, the 3-degree program with USC and HKUST. For that one, the application process is very much different. You do not apply to Bocconi for that one. You apply through Common App, so the American system. And that one is a different application round that usually runs from September until December. So I won't dwell too much on that, but if you do have questions on that, please write them in the chat and we can tackle them. One thing I want to mention, I already saw at the beginning, a lot of you are asking about results and whether the offers that we do are conditional, unconditional. I think this is a very important thing to underline. Bocconi does what we call unconditional offers, meaning that the evaluation is based on what I explained before. So your grades from the third and second last year, your test results, your language certificate, CV. But in case we admit you, and as you see here, we admit you pretty early on. So we admit you during your senior year, your last year, the admission will not be tied to your final high school grades, whether that is A-levels or IB or any diploma you're taking. So it will be unconditional in that sense. That is different from UCAS, for example. Of course, it will be tied to some minimum requirements. In case of the A-levels, you need to graduate with at least 3 A-levels, so 3 pre-U's or a mix of those. In case you're doing the IB, you need to graduate with the full IB diploma. There are no specifics in terms of subjects, but indeed, for the A-levels, for example, we do not accept the general studies and critical thinking. Those are just the only, I would say, requirements. We can go back to admissions later if there are other questions, but I will just move very quickly to fees and housing. I know these are two important elements when it comes to choosing a university. We may have some parents here, and I guess this is a major point in the process. Regarding Bocconi fees, Bocconi is a private institution, as Mario mentioned at the beginning. The yearly fee is around 13,000 euros per year. And we do have different types of scholarships. We have a very generous scholarship scheme when it comes to merit awards, so awards related to academic excellence. All candidates who apply for Bocconi bachelor programs are automatically evaluated for those kind of scholarships. That can be 50% or 100% tuition waivers for the first 2 years, and then they can be renewed for the third year if you keep up with certain standards of GPA. I would say usually, and then we have, also scholarships based on the family economic situation, and those need an application, whether it's fee release targets or a full scholarship that is given by the government that requires an application during summer. We also have student loans for students as well. Last but not least, where would you be living if you come and study at Bocconi? Nicholas didn't talk about where he was living here while he was in Milan. Maybe he wants to say something later on, but we do have housing for students. Not all students stay in housing. We don't have place for everybody, but we do have 8 dorms around the university area. 3 are basically on campus, and then there are a few scattered around the area around Bocconi. Those have single rooms with either shared bathroom or private bathrooms, and those, of course, have different prices, entail different prices. Common characteristics are full security, so 24 hours dorm and service, and a basic cleaning service. So dorms can be a good idea for those students who might not know Milan and want to, already know where they will be living once they start university. But I want to really reassure you, there are a lot of students who decide to stay off campus, so live off dorms. There are plenty of apartments rented out in the area close to Bocconi, which is also very safe and very central as well. I guess from my side, that's it. I don't know, Mark, how you want to deal with questions. If there's, should I really look at those?
Classic mistake. I wasn't paying attention there. Sorry about that. I've seen some of the questions come in, and first thing I'm going to do actually is, before you answer them, I want to ask Nicholas a couple of things. I will touch on the accommodation in a second, but first thing I want to ask you, Nicholas, is how did you actually apply? Did you do an SAT? Did you do the Bocconi test? How did you find the whole process as well?
Sure. I applied by doing something called the ACT. It's very similar to SATs. The reason I did it is because my A-levels from memory were, oh gosh, maths, economics, French, and something called an extended project. So from memory, I think the ACT was very more heavily mathematical, and I think the SATs is less so. And so that's why I chose the ACT, because I was mathematical. That's where my strengths lay. Of course, I've known people to do throughout Bocconi all of them. I think my thought process was, okay, if I was at boarding school, so I could just buy the ACT book, work my way through it, and take the test. But from memory, I think the most important things is when you can take it and when your results come, because I think the ACT and the SATs and the Bocconi test all run at different windows. So the most important thing, I think, is make sure that you can get your result quite before the deadline needs to be submitted for the application of Bocconi. But that was my preference.
Well, there have been a lot of issues with SATs and ACTs and COVID and being able to take them in person this year anyway. The whole thing is an absolute mess, which actually is a question I do want to bring Elisa back in on. You mentioned that the Bocconi test is online. I know that hasn't always been the case. Is it always now going to be the case?
I guess so. I don't know if Mario, if you want to comment on this, but I guess there's no going back on this point.
Right. So the idea that everybody, because we used to have this thing where it was what, the first weekend in February, everybody would have to get on a plane to Milan to take the Bocconi test. So that's unlikely to be a factor in the future.
It has been, I guess, a huge help this year as well. There have been a lot of SATs and ACTs test cancellations or delays. So for those students who decided not to apply with, international aptitude tests, or maybe were torn between Bocconi and SATs, or were planning to do SATs and then the dates were canceled, they had the Bocconi test as a backup. And I think this is a great help when it comes to being able to apply in this, in this uncertain times, I guess. So I don't think we will go back to the...
No, we will not go back. Elisa, you may want to add that we've actually published last week a tool on the web, on our website for the test.
I was posting it here in one of the questions. I saw one question about how to prepare for the test. And Nicholas correctly answered that there's no books for it. But one of the great news about, last week's was that we published an online test sample that you can actually do. So you can also see how the test looks, how it feels, and try out an entire test. So a full 50-question test. And plus there are 2 additional tests you can have a look at in there. So I'll make sure to type in the link so you guys can go and have a look later on.
I will put that in the follow-up email to this webinar as well, because I know that one of the, I don't want to say it's a criticism of the Bocconi test, but it is very Italian in terms of the way it's constructed and its logic. And sometimes that has thrown non-Italian students a little bit, perhaps more than the SAT or the ACT might have done. I suspect such differences are becoming less important than they were, but certainly that is a comment that we have found in the past. But again, the idea of the test is you shouldn't be preparing for it. You should just, well, not massively preparing for it. Don't, take too much time away from your A-levels. It's something that you should be able to do as well. But Nicholas, you chose the ACT. Was that because you were looking at doing American applications as well, or was it literally only for this one purpose that you did that?
No, it was only for Bocconi. I do know, for example, that it's very similar to the American route where they were taking SATs and ACT as well, but it was just for Bocconi. That was only my purpose.
Right. And then talking about how the actual process worked for you, I guess did you apply in the regular or the early window, or this?
To be honest, I can't really remember. Okay. I don't think put it this way. I don't think it was early. But I remember it being a lot smoother than UCAS, which was for the UK, which is just immensely complex. I hope it's got more simple over the years, but Bocconi's was really rather smooth. And the admissions office, might have been Elisa, might have been someone else, but all very responsive, because there's a few things that, for example, UCAS doesn't provide that Bocconi would need. So, for example, they'd say, okay, you know, what does your, because remember, Bocconi's having students from all over the world. They want to say, okay, what's the EA level equivalent to? And just those sort of clarifications. But it was very, very helpful, very smooth, and actually just really quite easy.
Yeah, Bocconi does understand pretty well what A levels are. Certainly the IB is much more known, shall we say, but A levels are really not a problem. Absolutely. It's when you start getting into other qualifications that you might have issues. Now, so Nicholas, one other question I did want to ask you, I'm going to come, everything else is pretty much for Elisa, I think, but I did want to ask you about this issue around accommodation. How was it when you first moved to Milan? How did the university help you with accommodation? I know we're going back a few years here.
Yeah, sure.
And then over the 3 years you were there, tell us a little bit about your accommodation history. Sure.
So from what I remember, when I got the acceptance, there was the invitation to apply for accommodation. And you just are known by a certain date. You put your preferences of the accommodation list from, you know, what you'd like the most for your least preferred, and you'd know on a certain date what you got. I was rather lucky. I got my first preference. Most people I know got their first preference. As Elisa said, the accommodation really is fantastic. You know, it's gated, it's secure, it's very close to Bocconi, most of them. And I think there's a real just fantastic atmosphere, particularly when you're in your first year in accommodation. I'd really recommend it, because especially if you're not from Italy or Milan, it's really fantastic, because you're all going to struggle with the same problems, and it's just fantastic having people there to just, you know, work through with, to bond, to, for example, people in your same courses, to have group work studies together. It was just, I really do recommend the accommodation in the first year. And then on the second, third year, I moved out. Second and third year, I found friends to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and then the third year, I lived on my own.
Okay, so, but all of that was relatively easy. I don't want to ask you affordable, because everybody's budget is different, but nothing tremendously frightening. I mean, did you work part-time at all during your studies, or have you just been dedicated to Bocconi stuff the whole time you were there?
That's a good question. I think the one big differentiating factor between being a student at Bocconi and being a student at some UK universities is I don't think it's feasible to work part-time, because the courses are so incredibly time-consuming and intense. It's not for example, friends of mine from the village I live have gone to some UK universities where the contact hours are quite min, so they've got a lot of spare time. Bocconi's the complete reverse. It's, you know, every day you've got about 5-6 hours, and then you've got coursework, you've got exams to prepare for. I can't imagine it's very feasible to have a part-time job on top of that.
Elisa, is that something you would echo from the admissions department?
It is. I mean, of course, we do have students who decide to do some side jobs while they're studying, but I wouldn't say you can work a proper part-time job while you're studying. I mean, attendance is not mandatory for all the courses, but if you do attend classes, you first of all, you have, you know, specific, there's a different amount of things you have to study, whether you're attending classes or not attending classes. And secondly, it's also a matter of benefiting really from the teaching method we have at Bocconi, the guest speakers that come to class, the group works, the case studies, as Nicholas was mentioning. So I wouldn't suggest, you know, students to think that they could work part-time and then attend Bocconi at the same time. It is feasible, but I guess you'll miss out on the really quality of the academic teaching and on the reason why we have that specific teaching method.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm studying in the UK. I can quote what Nicholas said. So it's different from the type of schedule you might have at the UK university. So it's pretty much intense. Okay,
so it's definitely not like a UK university from that perspective. And I think that's something that's quite common of a lot of European universities as well, to be fair. Okay, well, thanks for that, Nicholas. We might have more questions for you in a moment, but I would now like to move on to a few things that have come in through the Q&A, more specifically for Elisa. And the first one is about the various windows, early, winter and spring. We get a lot of questions about, should I apply early? Are my chances better if I apply early than they are in winter? And as you've already pointed out, applying in spring is probably not the most sensible strategy, but are there actually programs that are already completely full before you even get to spring? Or do you keep a few places in all of those? And I mean, where do you start with this, and what do you advise people? Because usually what I tell people around the early window is, if you want the safety, if you want the security, and you know this is what you want, go for it. But there's no actual real benefit to doing so. But is that correct?
Well, that's a tricky question. So there is the winter session, the early session, I guess, share more or less the same amount of places. Maybe the winter session is a bit bigger compared to the early session in terms of the numbers that we allocate in those, but those two are definitely the biggest selection rounds. No, there are places in the spring session. I mean, if their spring session is there, is because we still have places in the bachelor programs, but I have to be honest, as I said, it's residual. So again, first suggestion, if you are interested in Bocconi, if you think Bocconi is the place where you might want to end up, don't wait until the spring session. That's the first thing. When it comes between choosing between the early and the winter session, well, the first, I would say, advice would be how much you're interested in Bocconi. If you're really interested in the university, if you think it's one of your best choices, maybe you have 2-3 unis in mind, but you really think Bocconi might be the place, then applying in the early session is a good move to make, because first of all, you have one shot more. So let's say you don't get in the early session because you have to work on your Bocconi test or on your SAT score, then you can reapply in the winter session. And then, for example, for those applying with the Bocconi test, at least you can start seeing how it looks, how it feels in, doing it in person. Anxiety can play a role in it. So at least if you know Bocconi is one of the places you're really targeting, then I would say go for the early session. At the same time, if you have, lots of options in mind, when you apply for the early session, you get accepted, and if you get accepted, then you have to commit. We ask students to commit after we admit them, and they usually have 3 weeks to decide whether they want to enroll or not. And if they do enroll, then they have to pay the first installment, which is around 1,500 euros. It's a way for us to sort of stick their name to the play, their name on their place and say, okay, this place is safe, this place is yours. So there is some sort of commitment that has to be made. So again, I wouldn't suggest apply randomly in the early session if you have no idea, if you're not really sure that Bocconi is one of your top choices. But if it is, it's definitely a shot more that you have.
Right, but for those who absolutely do want Bocconi, the early session is primarily good because it gives you another chance if things don't work out, rather than you're statistically more likely to get in early than regular.
Statistically, I wouldn't say so. I don't know, Mario, if you want to add anything on this, but I don't, it's not a statistical thing. It's just, it's one chance more that you have, that you do have. And, you don't leave the spring session as the only backup that you have.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of the other questions we've got are really from people absolutely wanting to try to pin a number on you. And I don't like these questions. I know you don't like them either. There's a lot of questions of like, what SAT score do I need? What's sensible? What A-level grades or IB grades do you really need to get in? I mean, look, it's all well and good saying that, these tests are the filter and that's the way it works. I often, when I'm trying to answer that question, it's more a case of being realistic with people and trying to tell them, look, if you're below this, perhaps not. That's more what I'm trying to get to. You can never give a definite answer to these things, though, can you?
I wish I could. I mean, I wish I could have a perfectly clear answer saying, oh, you need this SAT, you need this GPA. Well, it's not this easy for 2 different reasons. The first main reason is that students make their own competition. So in every round, students compete with each other. So it's based on how good that students at applying those rounds are. So their, average SATs, ACTs, and Bocconi tests and GPA. So we cannot really predict 100% of that it's going to look. So I can tell you a number, and then maybe in the early session, I see a difference or a change in that. So there is no, I would say, certainty that certain number that I can give you. What we can say is that usually what we have seen in the last years is a trend, I would say, an increase in the competition and in the level of students who apply. So when it comes to the SAT, for example, I would say try and get a score that would be above 1,300, something like that. This does not assure you admission. It's just for you to have an idea of the kind of scores that you should aim at when it comes up, to being competitive and being comparable to the students who get accepted. And another factor, the second factor is, it's not just the test. So we've seen the percentages before, the test plays a big role, but the GPA plays a role too. So, you know, the two things balance each other out. So you need also to make sure to consider that when it comes to be realistic, as you were saying about your application. So look at your grades, look at your performance, you know, the kind of students that you are, and then think about how much work you should put in the test. And then of course, it's the competition again. So I gave a number for the SAT. For the ACT that Nicholas mentioned before, I would suggest to stay above the 27, 28. But again, those are suggestions. It's not something that you can take as, you know, perfectly.
There's no guarantee that if you get that score, you're going to get in. Far from it.
Yeah.
I do believe that the World Business Bachelor is the most selective in terms of SAT score or test score.
It's actually very peculiar because it is the most selective program, meaning that the number of places that we have for that program are very small. So the program hosts yearly 50 students, more or less, that are, you know, chosen between the 3 universities together. Whereas for Bocconi normal programs, we have plenty of places, and, you know, for the different bachelor programs. When it comes to the World Bachelor in Business, actually the SAT or the ACT are not mandatory because USC one test optional. So in order to apply for that, you don't need it. And aside from that reason, the other reason is that for that program, we really do a more, I would say, round and holistic admission evaluation on the students. There are other additional elements of evaluation taken in place. There's a, you know, reference letters, there's a video interview to shoot. We look at the grades from all the 4 last year of high school. So we look at predicted grades as well for that one. So of course the test doesn't play as a major role because we do have all the other elements. But for students who have taken the SAT or the ACT and have good scores in that, the suggestion would be do include it in your application. So it's optional, it's not mandatory, only for the World Bachelor in Business.
Okay, good. That's updated my knowledge on these things as well, because obviously I know there's a lot changing in the US with regards to these tests, and they're becoming less necessary all round. But one thing, Elisa, you did mention there in the context of WBB, but I wanted to come back to it in the context of other programs as well, because I've had this question from people who I'm pretty sure are on this call. You've mentioned the GPA, which essentially is your IB or A-level scores. You've mentioned the test score. You haven't mentioned the motivation letter and the role that that plays. How does that work with you guys?
I would say it's an additional element in the evaluation process. So it does play a role when it comes to evaluating students for scholarships, for example. That is definitely taken into account. It is also an element of evaluation that we consider whenever we might have similar profiles of students or similar positions in the ranking. So it's something that I always tell students, put some work in. I mean, it's not a US essay. You don't need to write 10 pages or, you know, do a very long elaborate, but it's a 1-2 page statement, but really work on it. Just explain why you're applying to Bocconi and why to those specific programs you're listing. So the motivation behind the choice of the program is something the admissions office is looking at. Right. It doesn't play a major role, I have to be honest. So you've seen in the percentages we've shown before, it hasn't got a big weight, but still it's something we have a look at.
Okay, all right, well, that's a good note to end on. We've had lots of questions here, but they have all been very much on a similar theme, which is how on earth do I get into Bocconi? So I'm guessing that most of you are actually already convinced that this is a good move. But just in case you need any more convincing, I'd like to ask Nick first from his perspective as a British student. I mean, obviously, you will know loads of people who didn't go to Bocconi, because you will have been a bit of an outlier, I'm sure, when you took this decision. Do you think this is something that more people should be considering? And if so, have you seen this? Have you seen any envy amongst your friends that you did this thing or anything like that? So,
I mean, not envy, no. No, I certainly would encourage people to do it. I look, you know, I mean, as I started, as mentioned, the Bocconi's ranking. Bocconi's ranking speaks for itself. And I think it's very hard to grasp at 17, 18 when you apply, you know, the benefits of what a university will give you in 2-3 years' time when you do finish. And I certainly think that I've had certainly a more well-rounded experience than if I went to most UK universities. I think to put it into context for most British people, I think the only UK universities where you can compare Bocconi to are Oxford, Cambridge, London School of Economics, and probably Warwick. That's it. It's of that caliber. And I think the most important thing for me at Bocconi was the people you were working with, and it's extraordinary. I think Bocconi, you learn how to work in a group and work in a group efficiently, which is just extraordinary through the group projects, the case studies you do together, and people from all walks of life, from all different nationalities. And it's absolutely wonderful to just be a part of that. I really would encourage people. I know it's incredibly daunting at 17, 18, trying to go to a foreign country, and particularly a country where at least I could not speak Italian when I started at Bocconi. But I would really, really encourage people to do it, because my gosh, in 3 years, you'll look back and be really, really proud of what you achieved.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicholas. And this is obviously one of the key messages we try to give to young people in the UK. It's that you can do this. You know, it's not for everybody. I'll freely admit that it's not for everybody. There are options, all sorts of different educational standards out there. You don't all have to go to the most elite, shining university in its particular field, but it is different to the experience you're going to get in the UK. I know a lot of you on this call are international by, you know, the very nature of your interest in Bocconi. And I do believe that it is something that gives you, you know, a very, very different experience from what you'll get at a British university. Not necessarily better or worse because of its location, but certainly different. Mario, I'd like to ask you to conclude this session with any remarks that you would like to make to our audience, anything else you think they should be aware of.
Thank you, Mark. No, I think, you know, I was listening very carefully to Nicholas, and I think what he said about getting out of the comfort zone to go in another place, it's not for everybody, as you said, but really it's something that afterwards you think about it and say, okay, I'm a different person, I'm a better person, and I can do many things in my life. So really, really a plus. It's very competitive, Bocconi, of course, but at the same time, a good curriculum could allow you to get in. We are not like Harvard or Oxbridge, so we don't have that acceptance rates. I know there was a question about the acceptance rates. Our acceptance rate is around 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6, maybe this year. Of course, the WBB, it goes 1 out of 10. WBB. And also the WB, not everybody applies because, you know, it's very competitive. So people don't even apply to that if they don't have a very high grade. I think as Elisa said, we have 3,000 places every year in Bocconi, and WB we have 50 places in 3 universities. So very different scale. So Bocconi is not for everybody, but at the same time, it could be in principle for all the people who want to try that. And we also have lots of scholarships. I know this year it's really relevant, this also because families may find difficulties in their economies. And this every 1 student out of 4 at Bocconi don't pay the full price. So, and we are going to increase this. We're going to increase this. There's a plan, a strategic plan, which includes funds for students who cannot afford, or, you know, brilliant students. So this is really an opportunity. So what I always say is that consider Bocconi together with other, of course, places, because you have double advantage. You go in a different country. It's a plus to me what Nicholas said about the people who don't speak English. So you challenge yourself, try to learn some Italian, which is fantastic, but at the same time live in a different country, and at the same time you are in your, let's say, you have all the services that you have at home, because you have a first-class university with all the people here at the university English speaking, all the services that you may expect in other places, in the UK for sure. And so challenge yourself, but at the same time you will have a reward afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much, Mario. Well, hopefully everybody has had a chance to ask all the questions that they had about getting into Bocconi and why it is that they should bother trying. Certainly, I found this a useful discussion. I hope you have too. I will send out an email tomorrow with a link to some of the materials that were mentioned in this session. Probably also get this recording up onto YouTube at some point as well. I'll also include my email address in there, and certainly Elisa's as well, so that if you've got any questions that you want to follow up with, you know how to get hold of us. But thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you found that a useful session, and yeah, have fun with whatever else you've got planned for this evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.